What's up guys, Readiness Reviews back with you again. We are finally back with part 2 and hopefully the final installment of my No.1 Mark III restoration project. Just for a quick catch up, I have this British BSA No.1 Mark III star dated 1918 that has, very unfortunately, been sporterized. They cut down the front wood to make it more of a sporting type firearm. At some point in the past that happened. They also removed a couple other parts like the protective wings on the rear sight here, but functionally it's still a complete firearm. And I have an Ishapore No.1 Mark III drill purpose rifle. This is a DP rifle, non-firing. The receiver on this has a hole through it that has been welded shut. There is a welded plug in the bore there. Everything on it is DP marked, so it is not really suitable for firing. These rifles were just meant for drill purpose, training and things like that. Never meant to be a firing firearm. However, these rifles are very cheap on the US market at the moment, and it has some very good components on it, especially all of the appropriate front end hardware that an Enfield should have. I wouldn't turn someone away from buying one of these DP rifles just as a wall hanger. I mean, they're really awesome for that. They're in great condition. They're the right weight. Everything about them externally is pretty much perfect and spot on. The only thing is you can't shoot them. With that being said, I would much rather harvest components off of this unusable rifle to bring my actual functional World War I era BSA No.1 Mark III back to its original military configuration. As I said in the opener, this is part 2. In part 1, I stripped the rifles down, and I was very disappointed to find out that the forestock on the DP rifle does not fit the original British No.1 Mark III due to the strengthening rear crosspiece on this far more modern No.1 Mark III. After posting that video, I had a flood of very helpful comments from viewers on what I can do in order to get this forestock to fit. So they ranged from anything from grinding on this metal piece to something as simple as just taking the stock bolt out of this rifle and putting it in this rifle, which would cause no harm to any parts, and at any point I could reverse them back and put them back the same way they are right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the least invasive option and work my way up until I find something that actually does work. I'm gonna spare you the takedown in this video. I did that in the first video, so if you wanna see that, you can check that out right here. I will post that. For right now, I'm gonna go ahead and get both these rifles taken down, and then we'll go through the steps on actually transferring the stock hardware from one rifle to the other. All right, so we have our two rifles taken down here. Let's take a look at why the forestock on the DP rifle wouldn't fit the World War I era rifle first off. So this is the forestock for that DP rifle. The rear side of it has this partition put in it that strengthens the back of the stock and makes the back of the stock all one flat piece. It has a cross bolt and this metal piece, and that really helps strengthen the rear end of the rifles. They did that in later No.1 Mark IIIs throughout the Commonwealth because that was a flaw in the original design of the rifle. That was a weak spot where they would have cracking in the back of the stocks. This original 1918 forestock, which unfortunately has been cut down, does not have any such strengthening partition put in. It's all wood on the back end. You can actually see that the cross piece here, this little wooden wedge, is actually split on either side. There's a crack going through them. And that was one of the main problems with this. Also, it has a cutout here, a square cutout, that the stock bolt, the square end of the stock bolt, nests into. And if you actually try to take the buttstock off before you take the forestock off, that square goes into this notch, and it turns, and it will do the same thing. It can split this forestock straight in half. You don't have any issues of that with the updated version. So on the original rifle, the stock bolt sticks out. On this DP rifle, it's actually recessed a little bit with no protrusion whatsoever. Our problem comes in when you try to fit the new forestock onto the old rifle. You can't get past this stock bolt. So the most easy fix for this that we're going to try first is going to be removing this stock bolt and replacing it with a stock bolt from this rifle. All right, so there's not going to be a fantastic way to film this based on how I have my little workshop set up right now, but essentially I have a vise down here. You can see I have the barreled action of the 1918 No.1 Mark III viced in. This is a very plain, cheap, not very good vise, but it should get the job done for what we're doing right now. I need to invest in a new vise, but for now, that's what I have. I have an extremely long shanked screwdriver, flathead. I've already inserted it in to the trapdoor in the buttstock and fed it down into the notch of the flathead screw that's in here. These can be extremely difficult to break initially. So what I like to do is just take a little wrench here and put it on the screwdriver and then grab the handle and just torque it. And there it goes, starting to turn. This one wasn't as hard as some of the ones I've had in the past. I'm assuming that the Ishapore rifle is going to be worse than this one from all that cosmoline. This rifle was fairly clean, but now that I got that started, I should just be able to turn it on out of there, and it seems to be coming pretty well. These take a while to unthread. I can feel the stock loosening it up. Let's see if it's out of there yet. And there it is. So we got that first butt stock off. We'll push the screw free. This actually still had the original leather washer installed. You see where it got bummed up a little bit, but there is our squared off stock bolt. We're going to repeat that same process with the Ishapore rifle. The Ishapore stock bolt came out fairly easily. Here's our two different stock bolts there. Certainly tell the difference on the front end. The original British one has that squared off portion that sticks out, whereas the Ishapore rifle is shorter and just rounded off on the end. Hopefully these have the same thread pitch. I guess we're going to find out in a moment. Before we take this any further, I do want to make sure that the Ishapore bolt fits the BSA rifle. So we're going to try to start threading this in here by hand. It seemed to start okay, but then I started feeling some resistance. I'll grab my screwdriver here. All right, so I do think that that is going to be a proper fit. Seems to screw in there okay. So we are looking pretty good so far. Before I start putting stuff back together, I'm going to have to clean this up because this stock has not been off of it in a very long time. That needs to be remedied. And I'm also going to clean up this stock screw, make sure everything is real nice and oiled before I start putting it back together. To clean up that stock bolt, I just scrubbed it down with some good old Hoppy's No. 9 and then wiped it off with paper towels. And then I gave it a good scrubbing with a toothbrush and some ballistol to lubricate it and protect it. Those threads are looking a lot cleaner now. I did the same thing with this portion of the receiver that everything threads into. And I also ballistoled the portion of the stock that seats into the metal of the receiver. So let's see if we can get this thing back together finally. Place the stock down in the receiver there. Drop the screw down in the hole in the stock. Sometimes these will have washers, sometimes they won't. I opted to use the original stock for my 1918 as opposed to the Ishapore one just to try to keep the rifle with as many original parts as possible. And we'll seat our long shank screwdriver down into the hole there, fill around until we're in the notch of the screw, and just screw it on in. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And nothing is protruding from the receiver. Let's get this back over to my work table and finish putting this guy back together. I'm feeling a lot better now that we got that part done, but we're just now coming up on the moment of truth, and that's whether or not this forestock actually fits this older rifle. So we'll turn the action up here and just see if it'll slide on. This is a heck of a tight fit. I've got it about this far down on the receiver, and it doesn't really seem to want to budge anymore just from applying normal hand pressure. All the major parts seem to be lining up properly with the original stock. So I'm just going to try to tap it in there with a mallet right quick. That absolutely does not want to go anymore, but it's going to have to in order for everything to fit right. It needs to go down another couple millimeters. So I'm really just going to put some serious pressure behind it and see if it'll finish sliding into place. So the back part of this seems fairly flush, close enough at least. The safety still works, but something is not quite right on the fit up front. It seems like this front portion of the receiver is up higher than it should be. I think the best course of action here is going to be to continue putting it back together and see if by the time we screw the screws in and tighten those down, it pulls everything into place the way it should be. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, let's take our original trigger guard, see if it fits into place. Certainly a lot tighter, but it snapped in. All right, well that's a good sign. It seems we have a functional trigger here. Let's screw this main screw in. I know all the screwing is riveting content. All right, that's looking pretty good. Well, that's a big step done. Now let's check out our front hardware and see if it's all coming together as it should. The last major component here is going to be the nose cap. If your sporterized Lee-Enfield had the barrel cut down and the sight replaced, this is the part of this restoration that you'll probably run into problems with. Luckily mine is still all original, so hopefully this nose cap will fit. So there's our DP marked Ishapore nose cap. And it should just slide over the front of the muzzle there And it did. All right, guys. I think it will be smooth sailing from here. We have our front handguard. This is an expensive piece to replace. Right now, the last couple of these I saw go on eBay sold for about $80 each for just this one piece of wood. The total cost of that DP rifle with shipping and everything was like $150. So between the cost of 4 stocks and the cost of these handguards, that rifle pretty much pays for itself. So we take these 2 tines, we slide them past the rear side there, and then up on top, we slide it forward until it recesses under the nose cap. And then once that's done, it's time for the rear handguard. Heck yeah. Well, this thing is almost reassembled. The last thing to do is to install the barrel band. This barrel band has a cool little marking on it, so we are going to use the original British barrel band as opposed to the Ishapore one. Oh yeah, look at that. Back the way it should have been from the beginning. Shame on whoever cut this one down, but I am very glad I was able to get it back looking the way it was meant to look. Well, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to take this guy out to the range. All right, so we're here, Readiness Reviews Range Day. I have my newly restored Frankenstein #1 Mark III Lee-Enfield, and this will be my first time sending rounds through this since I bought it as a sporter. I have a couple charger clips here. $10-round box magazine that actually loaded fairly easily. So I was having a hard time hitting anything offhand. I figured we bench rest it right quick, really take my time with the shots, see if I can put anything on target. It appeared I was hitting high, so I'm taking a very low 6 o'clock hold with it. The battle sight on this rifle is set at 200 meters and we're only at about 50 yards. So it should be shooting high at this distance. Maybe I'll just take it a little bit lower than before and we'll see if we can hit that plate. And there we go. All right, so we are back at the desk. The rifle actually did fairly well on range day. I was having some accuracy issues, but all that just comes down to me and not having the proper hold on the target. These rifles do shoot pretty dang high, seeing as how they were sighted in for World War I battlefields, and even then, when they were designing these rifles across the board pretty much, they overestimated how far the combat engagements would be. And so most World War I rifles have a battle sight that's pretty far out there. This project is one that's taking me almost a year to complete, which is absolutely ridiculous. There's no reason it should have been that hard for anyone else. I've just been very busy with other projects and real life stuff, and things get in the way and you put things on the back burner, but I finally got it done. We got everything reassembled and have shot it at this point, so I couldn't be happier with that. There's a certain pride that you have in a rifle that you've brought back from the grave yourself. Now, this rifle was still shootable in its other condition, and just because it's sporterized doesn't mean it's junk. I mean, it's still a functional rifle and still has history of its own, but I'm the kind of collector that does like it in military configuration, and when you can put one back in that shape, it gives you a special feeling inside, especially when you can take it out and shoot it the way I did this one. On the other hand, we have this rifle, which is probably the saddest rifle of all time. This is a mix of all the sporterized parts off of my BSA rifle and what was left of the Ishapore DP rifle. At this point, I mean, this is barely wall hanger status. I didn't have to do any major modifications to either of these rifles, so at any point I can swap the parts back and put them back in the same configuration they were in, and that's the way I wanted to do this process if I could. So I guess this one is just going to sit in the corner from now on, and I can use it to harvest other parts off of if I do need rifle parts for future restorations. If we look at this restoration from a financial standpoint, I think this is actually one of the cheapest ways you can get your hand on a #1 Mark III. So the sporterized rifle that I started with was $150 at a gun show. Now I know firearms prices are exponentially higher now than they were a couple years ago, and they're only going to go up and up and up, but sporterized military surplus rifles are still some of the cheapest out there, and you can find the lowest prices on. The drill purpose rifles are still readily available from Century Arms and J&G Sales. They're extremely cheap, between $100 and $150. So if you can snag a sporterized #1 Mark III that hasn't had the barrel cut down, and you can snag one of these DP rifles and you Frankenstein them together like this and get yourself a complete, correct in appearance #1 Mark III for about $300. I think that's a really good value, seeing as how #1 Mark IIIs are more expensive now than they've ever been in the past. I think on Royal Tiger Imports, they have them listed at $399 or $499 maybe. And pretty much everywhere you look, when they pop up on Access Arms, they're $500, $600, $700. The prices are just skyrocketing on these rifles. And even though this is not a parts correct rifle, I do think it's worth more now that I put it back in this condition than it was when it was sporterized and they were two separate rifles. The #1 Mark III is one of my all-time favorite military rifles, and I'm so glad to finally have one in my collection that is functional and looks the way it's supposed to. I just wish 303 ammo was cheaper and easier to get your hands on, because I would love to put a ton of rounds through this. But at the moment, I can't really afford to do that, and I don't think anyone else can either. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, guys. I truly appreciate each and every viewer out there. If you have any specific questions about this restoration project, please ask them down in the comments. Let me know what you thought about this restoration down in the comments. If you liked this video, please hit that thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel, because I will have more military surplus restorations incoming. From start to finish, this project took way longer than it should have, but I did finally get it completed. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next video. See you then. Peace.